that community was awesome, what God had did in its heyday. I would meet with people and I would hear their testimonies, and their testimonies were wild. And we would go through these back-to-back Life in the Spirit seminars, and we would bring people, and God would work powerfully, but it still was not yet a movement. But we would hear the stories of people, like my friend Tim, who had back cancer, deadly back cancer. And his parents, they lived in Mexico at the time, and they flew him all around the world, and none of the doctors could help him. Meanwhile, they started going to one of these prayer meetings. And his parents said to him, "We want to take you to this prayer meeting to receive prayer for healing." And Tim actually said, "I did not want to go." He said, "Because I was living in the swamp." He didn't use the term swamp. I'm just using that for this message. But he was living in the swamp. And he said, I knew that if I went and if I got healed, then I knew God was real, and then I knew the way I was living would have to be forsaken. He said, but I felt so bad because my parents had spent so much money and trying to get me well. So I went to this prayer meeting, and he still has the x-rays, and he was completely healed. It was one person after another. Their testimonies were with this encounter with God that happened profoundly. Somebody who came in, a woman from the community was working at a restaurant. And the Lord spoke to her, in 2 days a guy will come in wearing these, he'll look like this, and this is your word for them. And God read their mail and showed him that he loved them. And they came to Christ and started walking with the Lord. Another gentleman who was a Green Beret, and he told me some of the things he saw. And it was these things that he experienced in the war had hurt him so deeply that he was bound up in the swamp and self-medicating. And he got to the point that he was ready to take his own life. But then he got caught up with these believers, and God became real to him. It was one story after another. And many of the people in this church were part of the Jesus movement. It was the same thing. The Spirit of God was moving powerfully. And I remember hearing all of these stories from one person after another. Meanwhile, the community was dwindling rather than growing. All of that kind of stuff had stopped, right? They remembered what God had done in the past. They were holding to a hope that God would do it again someday. But they were always talking about, God is not done with you yet. Someday, my people, he's going to show up again. Right? But what happened is that a number of us were hearing these kind of stories. And they were getting into our being to a level that we did not want to live without experiencing it. At the same time, we were reading through the Bible, and especially the book of Acts, and seeing what the church is meant to be. And we started to be, the best way to say it is, pregnant with this passion for apostolic Christianity. It burned in us. We would go and take walks, and we would talk about this.